Welcome to Sober Dad Crew, the podcast where we talk about all things dad, sobriety, recovery, parenting, music, tattoos, and more. For more information or to get in touch, visit soberdadcrew.com.
My guest this episode is my friend Noah Johnson. We're really just a couple of regular sober dads. In this episode, we talk about mental health, sobriety, vinyl records, and we kick things off talking about facial hair and Movember. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Oh, no mustache.
No, it always comes off at the end of November. I do that fundraising campaign every November, and as soon as that's done, I hit a restart button. So
you do a solid mustache. I did the mustache one year. Very creepy. My daughter's like,
well, so I've done that. This was my 5th year doing it, and I always I shave all the beard off first, and then I usually start with a mustache here, and then I try to find that sweet spot the first couple days, and I always leave a little bit of the 5 o'clock shadow first.
Takes the creepy edge off of it.
Yeah, and I never know what year it's going to be where I shave my beard and I don't have a chin anymore. So I'm always nervous of what's underneath there.
Someday it will come.
65 days, rotate. So
yeah, that's what happens when we're aging. Our eyes, gonna get baggy,
saggy,
20 chins and.
Yeah, so I braced myself. And this year I learned, because even my older 2 kids, they get a little shocked when I do it. But having a 1.5-year-old, the last year was a little bit of a meltdown. So I had everyone in the bathroom with me as I was shaving. So they saw it in the process.
Right.
And it went over really well, except for baby Paul kept on grabbing clumps of hair and trying to push it up.
Put him back
face.
on. No, daddy, no.
Didn't really work too well. So.
Yeah, he needed glue to go with it.
Yeah, exactly. Some of that face Gorilla Glue.
Well, you got the baby, and how many other kids do you have?
So we have a total of 3 boys. We have James, who is the oldest. He's 10. He will be 11 on New Year's Eve. And
Nice.
Then Hank is right behind him, and he just turned 9 in September. And then our COVID baby, Paul, the next baby boom, he is just shy. He'll be 2 years old in March. So
I have COVID step kids. It's not exactly the same, but
that's a faster process.
It's a faster process and a slower process.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, I have the range. I've got 6, almost 11, 15, and 19.
Wow. All over the
spread. And I was like, wow, I've almost been a parent for 20 years, which is kind of a trip.
Yeah, I can't believe I am going to be, on New Year's Eve it'll be 11 years, and it's flown by. I remember my dad telling me that you don't realize how fast time goes by once you become a parent. And when I wasn't a parent, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then it couldn't have been more true. Each month feels like a day. So
warp speed. I mean, 20 years, a second.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this go around, it's because there's, an 8-year gap between our middle child and our youngest. Just seeing what we've learned as parents in the last this go around, it's unbelievable. Looking back and thinking how much we were just winging it for the first 2, and they ended up really well. And we're all right, we actually know what we're doing this go around.
And I felt that too. Figuring out how that really investment of deep emotion and time early on, you don't always see the results of that until later.
Right.
And especially looking at teenagers, you're oh, right, you don't just magically get a good relationship.
Right. Yeah.
It's
it takes a lot of
years in the making. Did you always want to be a dad?
No, I always enjoyed being around kids. But I never envisioned myself of having children. And I always say I never knew I wanted to be a dad until the day I found out I was going to be a dad. So that was a very big transition year for me that year, not just because I was becoming a father, but I almost had this subconscious clock, ticking down, like I have to get X amount of things out of my system before like a month or 6 weeks in advance. So it was a year full of change, and in the blink of an eye, it's been 11 years past that. So
yeah. We met, I think, in both previous jobs for both of us. And I don't even remember when it kind of came out that we were both sober. It just sort of came out in conversation at one point. And was that before your kids or after your kids, or?
It was in the middle. Yeah, I don't think you and I like even had like an official conversation. I think we talked work wise numerous times, and then with each conversation it got a little more, kind of just lax and more personal than professional. And
yeah,
I don't know, I really don't talk a lot about it that much. There was certain people in my life that I definitely knew I needed to tell, or they were a part of that change in my life. There's certain things other than not drinking alcohol that I do diet wise that I'm not a soapbox type of person.
Yeah.
So not, that's like the third or fourth thing in my arsenal when I'm having a conversation with somebody. But then you meet somebody, and I mean, this just shows how we all deal with it differently. You meet some people, and that's the first thing that they say, or the second thing they say after, introducing their name.
Yeah.
Which I can respect as well. So.
And you were like a just stop kind of guy, right? You didn't program or?
No, I never took a program. Things in my life that I knew if I didn't stop drinking that I probably wouldn't be able to back out of it. It had become such a norm in my life, in my drinking rotation or habits, that it wasn't like I had to check myself in somewhere. It was more of like, okay, I know where I'm headed and I don't like the person I am, or the person that I am when I'm heading in that direction. And then with a lot of other things in my life, I was just like, I'm going to try not doing it for a month. And I remember within the first 7 to 10 days, how well I felt, how well I slept. And I was like, almost, speaking of addiction, addicted to that feeling. I did the same thing about 12 years ago or 11 years ago when it came to, different arenas. But when it came to my diet, I stopped drinking, or I stopped eating meat. Same thing. I was going to do it for 30 days, see how I felt. And I never had the intention of being a vegetarian for the rest of my life. I never was like, hey, you got to do this because of the animals, you got to do this because of the environment, X, Y, and Z. I did it for a month, and I loved the results from it, and I never went back. And it was not my plan. And the only thing I ever planned to stop doing was smoking cigarettes. And that was one of the things I referred to earlier, is that when the last cigarette I had was the day of my first child's birth, or the night before that morning, but did like a hard stop on that. So there's some parallels with other areas of my life where, I liked the outcome and then I just stopped. But the only thing different is with alcohol, in certain times in my life, I never envisioned my life without alcohol, even if it wasn't like to excess. I think we all go through it, but I loved that finding a new beer, or like coming up, tasting something new, or the newest concept. I mean, I worked in the bar system for a while. I liked that atmosphere and that. So, I'm a social person to begin with, felt comfortable in that scenario. And I never saw my life personally and even professionally working in the hospitality industry without alcohol in it. It's such a norm. It's such just part of that style of life, so.
Yeah. Did you have I had like an epiphany moment. I was just like one night, second or third glass of wine, and had that moment. It's sort of what you said is, oh, I don't like this person, so it's just time to stop. And that's why it's like, this is not the right path that I'm on. It's not healthy for me. It's not like healthy for my kids.
Right.
And I stopped.
Yeah. I mean, mine's a little bit different, to be completely transparent. There was a business trip I got back from, and I drank the majority of the way back in airports and in the plane, and then had to drive from the airport, which was in Cleveland, Ohio, all the way down to Mansfield, Ohio, which is about 90 miles away. And I remember waking up the next morning and thinking I was still in Chicago.
A fine city. However.
Yeah. I was like in my hotel room, and my wife was at the edge of the bed, and she said something along the lines of, if you ever do this again, because I came home stumbling through the door. She said, if you ever do this again, me and the kids are leaving. And I did it again, and it didn't happen. So I was not to take anything away from my wife, but I challenged that. And even that kind of stuff, it as selfish as it sounds, it didn't click. Like, oh, they would leave. And, it happened, maybe one or two other times over. But it wasn't until it was within that same year. It wasn't until a couple months down the road where something clicked inside of me. And, I could have threats or I could have stipulations, but if it wasn't internal, and one day it was like, if it's not just me, it's my entire family. If I don't stop, then I'm going to end up in an environment I can't get out of. I'm also personality wise, I am like an all or nothing type of person. When it came to drinking, I could have one at home, but when I wanted to drink, I was going to make it worth it. And I never became like, one of those angry drunks or let's drive to this town. I was addicted to the social aspect of it as well. I just loved that conversation with a best friend or a conversation with, a total stranger, and talking for 3 hours about whatever. That was equally alluring to me than the way I felt when I was drinking alcohol. So,
and and part of that is we chatted about this, I think, outside the grocery store one day, and we're talking about work because we both go to conferences for work. Yeah. And there's a real alcohol component at so many conferences that I've been to historically. Like the bar is there, people go out. It's really like tied into that. And so then it's interesting to become the person or be the person at those conferences that's making a different choice. And I've had, varying reactions. I've worked with people who are like really suspicious of that. I think because it reflects something back at them that they don't want to see. And people who are like, oh, that's cool, whatever.
I mean, working in the hospitality industry and having it be on the road, and a lot of the times when we are on the road are either for, conventions like you were stating, but also the install or the almost to the where the grand opening of a hotel or a restaurant is. And it's a very celebratory atmosphere. And most hotels and restaurants have a ton of alcohol in them. So usually doesn't matter if it's breakfast, it's going to be bottomless mimosas and bottomless, Bloody Marys, or if it's a lunch cocktail or a full bar at dinner. So it's very prevalent, and it's almost kind of the lifeblood of the hospitality industry. It's all about access. It's all about, meeting as many people as possible, feeling as comfortable as possible, trying to sell a product or get in with the next crowd or whatever. So alcohol is a very heavy theme. And I remember the first time I did something work wise after I had gone through a stretch of time without drinking, when it's been 4 years. It was 4 years in July, so about 4.5 years ago. But I remember the first full on work trip that I took, and I was like, okay, what's this going to look like? And the thing that has worked for me is I don't feel the need to tell people, but I also don't want to be that person ordering like a mocktail and acting like I am drinking. So I usually just get a glass of water or a coffee. But if I have something in my hand, that's my Linus blanket. That works for me 98 out of 100 times. With that 2% of somebody like, hey, you need a drink? And I go, no, I'm okay. Oh, you're not drinking tonight? I'm like, no, that's okay. and they're like, do not drink at all. And that's where the conversation
Yeah. Right. Because some people do ask, or some people take the no thank you, and some people are really like, no, really, really. And I'm like, no,
Right.
really, it's okay.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you just have to say, like, look, I'm sober. And, you know, and I've really started to be open at work too, because I think it's an important thing to share, that people have stories and people have struggles, and like you get through them, and it's not a bad thing to share that with coworkers, because we're all people, you know, trying to like get through the day, do a good job. So a lot of my episodes so far have been pretty heavy, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because one of your other jobs is at Angry Mom Records, which is a store that takes much of my disposable income.
Oh, by the way, I was saving this for later, but you have a gift certificate for $25 down there from I'm guessing it's either a birthday
my brother
or Christmas.
Yeah, my birthday was yesterday, so
yeah, I got
52 big ones.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
I got a notification on my phone through our online portal that was purchased, and I actually personally wrote it out today.
Well, there you go. I will be by to get my brothers are very much like, what do you want for your birthday? And I was like, just call Angry Mom, because I will definitely utilize that.
It's a funny side note, real quick, because I know you have some things lined up to ask, but I always am asked what I want for my birthday or Christmas, and I always say, just get me a vinyl record. And I've never received a vinyl record for a gift from like a family member. Coworkers, yes, but not.
Yeah.
They always say, I never know what you have. So
I did export like my music buddy list to show people, which also has like the want list. Some of those wants are not like reasonable, easy finds. Like Wilco's kicking television on vinyl is not an easy thing to find for a reasonable amount of money. But people usually get me some kind of record, and some people, like my brother's like, just tell me specifically what you want. And I don't want to like send an Amazon.com link. Because side note to the listeners, half the time the records come damaged if you order them through Amazon. They really do. I literally have had Amazon just put a sticker on like right on the thing and not even put it. And I remember I ordered David Bowie's Black Star when it came out as like a birthday present, which is an incredible album and like a beautiful album.
Oh, definitely.
It's really incredible.
With the literally star. Yeah.
And they literally just slapped the mailing label on the shrink wrap and stuck it in the mail. So it just came totally destroyed.
Yeah, a lot of people don't, and we do a lot of online sales, which I'm heavily a part of when it comes to like prepping the orders and sending them not just in the United States, but in all the world. Our user rating is 99.5%. And we are highly approved in the quality and quantity for that matter. But we have an individual by the name of Seven that works down there, and he's been packing records for, I think, 11 to 12 years now, maybe even more. And none of them show up damaged. And we have like special mailers for LPs that you put them in. But his technique he always sandwiches them between two other vinyl record sleeves with no other records in them, so they're kind of like sandwiched in. And then the way he tapes they all show up in perfect condition. I mean, that's by far the highest compliment we get on our feedback on a daily basis is how well our product is packaged. So, because
it is such a bummer to be like excited
when you finally get it.
I mean,
even when you get it and like the corner is nudged, and you're just like, oh
like I'm gonna put that thing in a plastic sleeve and the corner is not. I mean, I just got an album from Brussels that I couldn't get in the US, and it just arrived today. It took a long time, but it came 100% in good shape.
That's awesome.
And which is awesome.
They're called whiplashes. Have you ever seen like them not folded up or wrapped in a package?
No, this had it seemed like it was corrugated, but with almost some air pockets in it or something.
Yeah. So like cardboard cut inside of it that almost like holds it
Yeah.
like the size of, just above 12 inches. And then there's the outer part, it's called a whiplash. It like folds around and then you tape it, and it is corrugated in certain areas. So, but yeah, they do the job, but just takes a little more effort.
Yeah, but it's better to make people happy. Though you could, you got that 0.5%. I mean, you guys could like work on that.
Yeah, we are. We're in the midst of working on it.
Like, that'd be like telling your kid, yeah, it's that 99 is good at school, but you really got to like study more. Yeah.
It's that 0.5% that are just looking to complain about anything.
I mean, that's an amazing thing on its own if that's your percentage. Because there's usually a much higher percentage of people who just want to complain about stuff.
Yes.
So if that's like what you're getting, that's pretty good.
Right.
Because, there are some fickle buyers of vinyl records in the world.
Yes, very. And just, most of it is justified, but there's a lot of people that they want that pristine, VG Mint Plus, or VG Plus Mint.
Well, let's jump into some other stuff. So it's the holiday season. Do you have a favorite Christmas song?
Oh, definitely. Ray Charles' Christmas Time. It's actually featured in the National Lampoon's movie.
Mm-hmm.
And Chevy Chase, there's a scene where he goes up into the attic to get something or shut something, and he gets locked in there, and the family leaves without him, and he ends up watching like reel-to-reel films of his childhood, and that song chimes in. So, and it's funny that you bring this up because there's a great story that just happened to me on Friday. Is that, as you mentioned, I work at Angry Mom Records, and I used to be a customer there even when I didn't live in New York, when I still lived in Ohio. It's always a destination spot when we would come visit Ithaca. That was a spot we always went into, and now I work there. But even as a customer, I have been searching for that record. And I think it was released in 1985, and it went out of print very quickly, and they never reprinted it. And it just so happens that they remastered it and are releasing it this season. And I was looking to finally get it, but one of my coworkers, Adam, who works at the shop, as an early holiday Christmas present, found an original copy, I believe, on either eBay or Discogs, and he handed it to me on Friday. So
nice.
I got to listen to it Saturday morning on vinyl in person for the first time, not through the TV or streaming it. And it was everything I wanted it to be. So,
and a good story, and sort of, that's the key of music, right? Is like there's a story behind it. It touches you, it hits you in a way.
Oh yeah.
Because it's really more than like the Chevy Chase movie, right? It's like the song and the emotions, and like, I mean, I like me a sad Christmas song.
No, it's very, I mean, it reminds me of like watching movies, especially Christmas movies around this time. I'm a huge holiday freak, like the gaudiness of it all. Usually not my style, but there's some, and especially having kids, it like elevated that even more. But always been a fan of holiday and Christmas music. But yeah, the beginning of that song is like a low guitar with a keyboard, and as soon as you hear it, like I'm in the mood. I'm right in that holiday spirit immediately. So, have you heard it before?
I did, because I think I saw on Instagram that you put a picture of that up.
Yeah.
And so then I went on to one of those online services that we will go to and put, because I have like 150 song Christmas playlist that I've been curating over the years. So that got added to it, because I was like,
so what's your really favorite Christmas song?
I mean, I think in general, like I'll Be Home for Christmas. Okay. I like sad songs, but also I really love Lowe's Just Like Christmas is like a more contemporary holiday song.
Well, I love it because it seems like some of the like indie bands, like a two-sided, 7-inch of like a quick Christmas song that they press. Like I know the Felice brothers, who are out of upstate New York. They released a couple of years ago just a 7-inch AB of 2 Christmas songs that are not on any other album of theirs. Never have heard them perform any of it live, but it I love that theme, especially it not being pop artists doing it anymore, but more of like an indie rock kind of approach to Christmas music. So
there's
I'm
like
all about that.
Bad Religion has "God Rest You Merry Gentlemen," which I just think is super funny, right? Because like he is the ultimate atheist in the world, and then they're doing
He's
that
local
song.
here.
He is local, yeah. I think he teaches at Cornell, so he's I think they don't live right in Ithaca, but they're local, so you like bump into them at Wegmans.
Right. Yeah.
So I think 2022 has been a pretty awesome year for music. There's some years, and this seems like one of them, just a ton of stuff that I love. Did anything really like jump out to you this year that you just kind of can't stop listening to?
You know what? Not as much as new music. There was a lot of stuff that was re-released that I got introduced to. But when it comes to new stuff that usually this would not be on my radar, but I fell into it. The new Black Midi album was all over the place, loud and crazy good, which I was very shocked by. And then Black Country New Road, their new one that came out like right in the beginning of the year. And then I think the same week it got released, they announced that the lead singer like left the band due to mental health issues and some other things. So I picked that up and heavily on rotation this year.
It is an interesting record.
It is
like
very
the instrumentation,
and that's not usually my style. And I got the deluxe version that came with, I believe it's the entire new album, but played live as well. I think they do it like in order of the track list, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's not usually my go-to genre, but both of those albums, there's a lot of similarities to them, but different approaches. But then I don't know, I fell into this like a lot of new reissues of like late 90s, early 2000s hip hop. And I mean, I've always enjoyed hip hop and rap, and mid 90s is usually like where I fall into it. But there was just I think he was a DJ first, but a rapper by the name of Edon. And rarely in the music in the shop do we all buy a record. Like there's 6 of us, and usually 3 of us will like it, 3 of us won't. Or 1 and 5, 2 and 4. But this one, he used all psych samples in the beats, and it's one of the best albums I've heard in a very long time. And I think that was from like the early 2000s. It's called Beauty and the Beat. And
I think I just read something about him.
Yeah, and that's another thing is he came out with a couple other records, and we all visited him after that, and it wasn't there. It was like everything came out correctly in this record. So yeah, I'm trying to think anything else. I fell into a big MF Doom revisiting. Oh, another new album that came out this year is the Danger Mouse Black Thought Cheat Codes album. Probably I know Kendrick Lamar released a new album, but probably my favorite hip hop album of this year and maybe in the last 3 years. The album I got also came with a CD, which we actually have a CD player still in one of our vehicles. And every time we're in the car as a family, or if I'm in the Jeep by myself, I listen to that album at least one of the directions I'm going in that day. It's close to perfection in my point of view.
No, that's a great one. And I'm not like a huge hip hop listener, but my 19-year-old son, he is.
Yes.
And the more contemporary stuff. So like, come holiday time, I'll buy him something, but I'll take him back. You really need the first Public Enemy album. You like 100% have to have this. Or, for me, one of the things that came out this year was Prince and the Revolution, the live at Syracuse. Mind blown. And I got 2 copies, and I gave that to him, and I was like,
awesome.
You must know this.
Yes.
For what you like to listen to, comes from here.
Exactly.
And I know people around here that were at that show. It was like the last show, right? The last show,
we had
show 99 of that tour.
Being like, I was at that show.
Yeah. Like the people who are my age at that show were like 15 when they were there. It's like, oh yeah, I was not. Like I saw some great shows when I was a teenager, but not Prince.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, that would have been pretty incredible because I think maybe Purple Rain was one of the first albums I bought for myself. I think I was in 6th grade. And
now, did you buy that on vinyl or?
It was cassette.
Cassette.
Yeah. I kind of went like.
I'm trying to think. I remember the first CD I ever bought was Korn's "Follow the Leader," and I remember like my brother used to let me listen to his CDs, and then I remember that was the first one that like I spent my own money. I remember the first CD he ever bought me was Fuji's "The Score."
I mean,
I might still have that.
That is an incredible record. So that's not a bad one. Yeah, I kind of grew up in like a NPR classical music house, but my parents did have records, and they had the very memorable, when you're a young person, like Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass album with like the whipped cream situation.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and they had like some Beatles and some like Dave Brubeck stuff. My mom actually had some very cool Brubeck colored vinyl things that when they ended up moving at one point, I was like, where'd those go? They're like, oh, we sold them. And I was like, oh, you're breaking my heart, because they were incredible.
At least they didn't just throw them away.
No, like they had one of those people come through and, grab stuff, and those probably sold for a lot because they're super cool live albums, but oh well.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially the last 3 years where vinyl has just taken off again. I mean, it is hilarious that something like this did come back around. The first house I bought was a estate sale, and it had 3 working vinyl record players in them, one being a console, and then 2 of the more kind of suitcase traveler ones. I got into vinyl records because one of my buddies and I, back in my hometown, his dad used to run storage units, and every quarter or every 6 months or so, they would auction off people's units that hadn't paid for a certain amount of time. And it wasn't like that show on TV where a bunch of people are there. It was pretty much like they had a day and you walked past it and you offered an amount of money. And we bought 50,000 records for $900 and had no idea what we were doing. We just were like, hey, we can probably make money off of this. And within a short amount of time, all those records were in my basement. And long story short, after we found out we were having our second child, my wife was like, you got to get these out of our basement because I can barely make it to our washer.
That's a lot of records.
Yeah. So the night before, we ended up selling them, piece parted them for about 1.5 years, made, all of our profit back very quickly, and then sold the rest, in a lot to a couple guys, half a state away. That's what started me getting back into it and listening to it. And then I got some of my dad's records because his sister lives in the house they grew up in, and his records were still in the basement. So I got that like foundation, Rolling Stones, Beatles, Beach Boys, things like that. And then when they started, kind of gung ho on pressing new music into vinyl, I was completely sold. I mean, you talk about addictions. That's something I'm definitely addicted to. I go home every single night that I'm in the shop with at least one record. So I don't see any end in sight either.
Well, and there's a lot of things I like about it. Of course, I grew up in a time of cassettes and vinyl and CD, but there's like an intent. There was the going to the store. Like I remember, I think it was Rattle and Hum. And my mom driving me to the store the day it was released. and like listening for a week or something to the same thing, like reading. I always read the liner notes, like really reading. And I'm a jazz listener too, and liner notes are like so important in that world. Right? There's like famous people who write those liner notes, and there's so much to it. And I think there is something lost when it's just like, yeah, it's great. Like there's an album that came out this year by this woman. She goes by Spring Summer, and it's an only digital release. And it's a really incredible album. And I can't buy it. Like I try and buy stuff by the little bands, like that's one of my ways to try and help. We live in Ithaca. We have a pretty good live music scene, but you can't see everything. But there's definitely some small bands out there. And one way to help the ones you like out is to buy the record.
Yeah, definitely.
You go
buy merch and go to
go to shows. Shows are back. It's so weird. There's like that weird gap as someone who goes to a lot of live shows. All of a sudden, no live shows. Was a strange period of time for me as someone who's like, I've been to hundreds of shows. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I remember sitting in COVID.
Yeah.
And the last show I went to pre-COVID was Ockerville River at the Haunt.
Oh, wow.
And I remember sitting in COVID and going, oh, that club is now torn down.
Yeah.
Right? There currently is no Haunt in Ithaca. And so for folks who don't know the Haunt and don't know Ithaca, it's a pretty storied little club, and it used to be a real hole in the wall, tiny place. But Nirvana came through there, Pearl Jam came through there, all these blues artists. Yeah,
it was the perfect size. We talk about this a lot in what we're about to unveil. That Ithaca really lost that medium-sized venue. You have the bar scene where you can pack in a certain amount of people, and then you have the State or the Hangar Theater, and some acts just aren't big enough to fill that at this point. So, and it's only open seasonally. So there is definitely a gap, and the Haunt filled that for quite a few, decades. So hopefully something comes up soon. I think we might have something up our sleeves, but
yeah, obviously I'm looking, I see snippets on, social media. I'm excited for that. Get you guys out of the basement.
Real quick to add because I agreed with everything you said about listening to vinyl. The thing I love the most about vinyl, and even before I got into vinyl, I never liked streaming music. And I'm like one of the few people that I personally know. I have no Apple Music. I have no Spotify. I don't get my list at the end of the season or whatever of what I listen to. But music was always a huge part. We didn't have TV growing up in my parents' household when they were still married. My parents are both in early childhood development. They were both professors and worked in child development, child psychology through universities. And we didn't have TV. So we listened to the radio and ran records every single night. But the thing I love the most about listening to records is it makes you listen to the entire thing. I grew up in that generation with CDs where you could go to track 4 and I didn't have to fast forward to it. I can just go directly to it. But vinyl takes that next step forward or backwards, however you view it, where you put it on that first side and you're listening to it all the way through, and you're going to then flip it over or keep it. One of the ways I listen to music, I listen to side A until I'm tired of it. And then it's almost like a treat to see what else is on the back of that. And then the like you were talking about what comes with a vinyl, it's like an artifact. It's one of the most annoying things to store. But when you're listening to it and you have either a gatefold or, an insert or, art that comes with it, it's just, oh my God, and like, I don't know if you do this, but the smell of new vinyl, old vinyl, it's addicting. Like I don't know. I still want to find out if they've like put something in there that just makes you addicted to buying it.
It's like that new car smell, but it's the new vinyl smell.
Yeah. And we all joke around at the shop, and when it is a gatefold and the first time you open it, it's almost like you're cracking a digit of your finger, or like your pack. You're getting this like, oh, like I can't believe I have this new vinyl. Let's dig into it. So
right, because speaking of impractical, like I moved in June with my fiance, and I was like, oh man, these records are like really heavy.
Yeah.
Like, because I was like putting them in milk crates. I'm like, damn,
Yeah.
right. Like
They're
one at a
dense.
time, it's not bad, but like 30, 40 of these.
It's very heavy for sure.
And
On
I've been,
average, a one record I think is like 1 pound, 2 ounces. So then a lot of them you get the 180 gram or the double LP, and they can be even heavier. So
that's why you guys at the store are so fit. You're just
oh yeah,
like doing your
we're
reps on the vinyl, just like
just wait for our calendar to come out.
you could. I
Yeah,
might buy that actually. It'd be pretty incredible.
we would each get 2 months.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
but
there's
you
a
and
lot
you
of
got yeah.
cool stuff happening at that place. I'm really going from being a customer, from out of state, and then being a customer in state to got close with them by starting doing their social media 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and that was the introduction. And then one day the owner was like, "Hey, can you?" Because I do marketing for some other companies. He was like, "Can you create a hiring ad?" And I was like, yeah. And so like I worked on it that night or the next day, and I was, using color schemes and seeing what would work best, font wise. And then I was like, wow, I think with my other ventures, I think I could do this. And, I remember going home and telling my wife, like, I think I can pull this off, or I have my other job where I'm on the road and then I do some stuff from home with some other ventures. I was like, I think I need this. Like, I've always needed like a time frame to be somewhere to keep my schedule going.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of doing some of the work I do with other companies, being subcontracted and working kind of at my own pace on other projects. Too much time on my hand is not good for me. So
Three kids isn't enough.
No, it's not. If it was up to me, we would have 5 kids. So I'm trying to rebuild the Cleveland Browns offensive line. So
You're a Cleveland Browns fan, often
huge Cleveland Browns.
heartbroken.
Yes, yeah, I'm used to it.
I mean, I
But
grew up
yeah,
as a New Englander.
going from being a customer to now like actually working there, and then being a part of this transition that we're literally in the middle of. I can think this is the first time it's been said out loud outside of our four walls at the shop, but we are moving on December 11th to the second floor of the current building we're in. And we will be doubling our physical footprint. And then also we're hoping by spring of this year, unveiling an event center or event portion of our store with a stage to host bands and that kind of mid-range event spot. So we are on the precipice of something huge, and hopefully everybody in this community will take part and be happy with it.
Well, and what I like about that too is I'm guessing those are going to be all age shows.
Yeah, that's the one thing we noticed a lot of especially obviously in bars they don't want people that are underage, but even in some of the non-bar event spaces, a lot of it is 21 and older. We threw Ithaca Underground. We threw a show probably like 3 months ago, 2 months ago. It all came about within a matter of 2 days. It was planned. Maybe 2 or 3 days. So not a lot of promotion, but it was an all age show and the whole place was packed. I mean, it was elbow to elbow, and it was like on a Thursday night. So we're like, okay, we need to, when we officially start doing this, we need to make it all age shows. So there's a lot of people, in that 18 to 21 or 20 age, that are just looking for something to do music wise in town and in a safe place. So that's what
I mean, or younger. I mean,
yeah.
there was I grew up outside of Portland, Maine, and there's this club called Zoots, and there's a Facebook group, this Zoots alumni group, and this guy owned it, Chris Clark. And what was amazing was he had one night every week was an all age alcohol free night. And he made that Friday night, which was like incredible, right? Like, I mean, that to me, like, I don't know if I recognized that at the time, But like
Right.
now as a, grown human being, like I worked at the State Theater, like I understand the economic side of like,
Yep.
slinging beers at shows. And I was like, whoa, this is like really incredible that, your all ages night is a Friday. And, most of the time it was dance stuff and like really, I'm totally dating myself, but it was like, mid 80s and just really incredible Echo and the Bunnymen and The Cure and like all these really great bands that I still listen to. But I was like, wow, you did that on a Friday night. Like that's like a community service. And the fact that they just, I think it was last weekend, did this reunion thing with him and it's, totally sold out.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
like, my friends that are still around Portland, they were all there. And like, that was so much fun.
Yeah.
Cause Ithaca's tough, I think, for teenagers. There's not always a ton going on. I mean, there's a ton going on that you shouldn't be involved in.
Well, yeah, well, obviously with the 3 colleges or 2 colleges and university, it's geared toward that age group because they're trying to cater to them because they spend the most amount of money or their parents do.
Yeah. Our economy is very built on that in these parts.
Yeah, for sure.
It was like in COVID when the bars could do takeout drinks. It's like, wow, we're like really admitting what's like really happening culturally. You can do mixed drink takeout.
Yeah. I mean, I don't regret it, but I didn't think when I quit drinking that would be an option where you could get to go drinks. or
in the South there are like the drive-thrus.
Walk out into the street, with it. So I'm probably glad that, I had stopped drinking.
Yeah, it does seem like the notion of drinking and driving when you can do like takeout. Or I mean, there's some southern states I've been in, like, is that a drive-through?
You can drink in the back. Yeah.
It's like a drive-through alcohol situation. That doesn't seem like the best.
I remember the first time I noticed that in Knoxville, and this was like pre-Uber, and our taxi driver was like, "Hey, you want to stop and get drinks to go?" And we're like, "What?" Like, we didn't even know that was a thing. But so how long has it been since you have not drank?
It'll be 13 years in February.
And did you do a program?
I stopped, but what I did do was I did a lot of therapy because there was, for me, definitely like a mental health component of sort of self-medicating. And I was getting a ton of migraines and I was, married to my kid's mom, and that was not in good shape. So the first episode of this, I sort of talk about that night and literally sort of feeling like, my grandmother from whatever, I'm really not religious, but this notion of like my grandmother kind of like tapping me on the shoulder and being like, dude, like you were on you were going down the wrong path. And then looking, it's sort of what you say, you look down that road and you're like, oh yeah, like further down that road's really not a good place. And just sort of turning around. But I think for me, like dealing with depression and other things that were going on, and anxiety was like a key component of that. So like I didn't do AA, but I did, have a therapist and worked through a lot of stuff. That's why I like, what you do with Movember. Circling back to the beginning a little bit, we were talking about your excellent mustache that has gone away, but it could come back. But you've done that for a long time, and I think you've raised almost 10 grand over the years or something like that.
Yeah, it was so this was the 5th campaign that I did. I wish I would. My only regret is I wish I would have started doing it earlier, but my mind was all over the place that I don't think I could have pulled it off or put the right amount of effort into it. But it just so happened that 5 years ago I decided to do it. I usually have a beard all year round, and then it was kind of a bit of a drastic, change. And it's in money aside, like I've said in person to people, and then also when I do my fundraising campaigns, through social media platforms, is that my favorite thing is that it starts conversations. So if it's somebody that I've known for a while and they're like, "Oh my God, I've never seen you in a mustache before. Why do you have that? Or what'd you do?" It's just that natural, hey, let me tell you why I do this. And then, it used to be very focused on men's mental health, which, I think there is more of a stigma when it comes to that gender with mental health, because there's tends to be less discussion about it.
Yeah.
But when I do posts about it, I say it's everybody, because I don't want to not include or, separate any gender or anybody, because we all deal with it. We just deal with it differently. That's what I've really enjoyed about it. And yeah, in just 5 years, I've raised, I think it was like $50 away from $10,000. So it like I said, the money of it is awesome that's raised for it, but the conversation and kind of that ripple effect. I usually, my last post of the campaign after I announce how much was raised or when we hit our goal, is that I usually, share bits of my story and what I dealt with or continue to deal with, because I don't think you're ever truly, cured from mental health or anxiety. You just learn to not ignore it and to either vocalize how you feel, or internally you're like, this is why I'm feeling this way, and let's figure out how to make it to that next step. I hadn't had any type of, even through the pandemic, I had not really had anxiety or bouts of depression. So there was like a stretch of 3.5 years, and then around this time last year, out of nowhere, it hit me. And I think anybody that has dealt with depression before, it's like, I always say, it's like putting on like a familiar wet blanket or sweater. And like, it almost has like a smell to it. You look at things differently, and it's almost just like, oh shit, it's coming back. And
I remember I figured out at one point along the way, I was like, oh, right, like depression will never let me down. It's always there for me if I want that, right? Like, well, the world's against me, but depression, it does. It is like that sweater you can just put on, and it's always there for you. And so
it's
it is sort of like
it's
a
even
constant.
If it's years apart, it's very familiar. It's like, oh my gosh, it's almost like you're like, I thought I had you beat, but there you are.
But it's like a sweater and a vice.
Yeah.
At least for me, it's like crank.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel that like pressure.
Well, it's also, and I don't know how it is with you. I mean, my wife and I have been together for about 13 years now, and she sometimes knows before I do. And early in our relationship, she's a very intuitive person. She's younger than I am, but way more mature and intuitive than I am. And we're very both cadence and routine people, and she can almost tell it before I can. And like I said, I had gone through years and everything was not sunshine and rainbows. We were going through a pandemic, but everything was good internally. We, had our bearings about us. We had a plan of what we were going to do. And unfortunately, under those circumstances, I didn't want it to be under those circumstances. But that time frame we were in shutdown was the most amount of time the four of us, me and my wife and our older two kids, got to spend with each other. And it was great. Like we did game nights every night. But yeah, I thought I had all this stuff kind of beat. And then this time last year, it hit me again. And I didn't, for a while, I did like kind of like my normal routine where I'm like, everything's all right, because I'm trying to convince myself. But then I start falling out of, like, I call my dad every single day. He knows if there's a period of time where he doesn't hear from me, something's up. And my wife can just tell from me being quieter, me not being in my normal routine, me not having my normal energy. So I know it's something that's always going to be there, but each time gets easier. And each time you are like, okay, I can, with my support and the stuff that I've learned about myself, I can get myself out of this. But it can get dark really quickly. It's unbelievable how your brain can be your best friend one day and then be, whispering lies in your ear the next day. It was one of those things where I thought I had certain things beat or certain things were past me, and I stopped doing certain things that make me feel good and make me feel healthy. And it was a great reminder of like, hey, you don't have this beat. This is going to be work, and you know how to do it. But I feel like I'm one of the, I don't want to say luck and I don't want to say blessed, but I feel very, what's the word I want to use? I feel very grateful that I have not had one of those times where I felt like I needed to drink. we all deal with it differently. I have friends and I have family members that have gone to, paid money to get help and get treatment. And then 3 weeks out of treatment, they slip back into a routine and they're drinking. I feel grateful that I don't really have that temptation. I'm kind of, like I said earlier in this conversation, an all or nothing person. So once I've turned that off, may it be, something like I said, cigarettes or certain diets that I shouldn't be eating. Once I kind of like shut that off, it's not a temptation anymore. I know I'm probably never going to drink again, but I can be around it. My wife still drinks when we have dinner some nights and there's alcohol in the house, and that works for me, but that doesn't work for everybody else. That's why I think, especially when it comes to drinking or a combination of drinking and mental health, it's all catered to that individual, and you have to find what works best for you.
Yeah, we're a totally sober house because my fiance is in recovery.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting sort of threads that went on around Thanksgiving on my Sober Dad Crew feed. And people are like, well, because we hosted Thanksgiving, what are people going to do? Are they going to be bummed out? I'm like, I don't know, but they just know that's sober house. And we did like some fancy mocktails and it was fun and like nobody cared. And, we ate at 2 p.m, so no one was worried about driving home. I remember some epic larger family blowouts as a kid with one of my uncles who would always drink too much and it would get ugly. And that was really formative for me, I think, as like a person, but also as a dad, because as someone, I'm a better dad, mentally healthy and sober. The world is a better place when I don't drink. And when I'm like taking care of my mental health and I'm, as a parent, like patience is key.
Yeah.
And that was that's one of the signs for me. If I'm feeling like I'm not like balanced, is like I'm real impatient. And so when I see that, I'm like, right, I got to like recenter. It's never about like a temptation to drink, but it is that notion of you have to be constantly vigilant. Because for me, everything I do is about my family.
Yeah.
Work is about supporting my family and providing for my family.
Mm-hmm.
I really like my job and all that, and I work hard at it, but it really is about like doing the things to make sure my family is safe and like nurtured.
Yeah, that is, to kind of piggyback on that. That's my main, I don't know if I want to say motivation, but I know I'm a better person. I'm a better father. I'm a better spouse. I'm safer when I'm not drinking. So that's as elementary as you want to pull all the other fluff out of it. That's the bottom line. That's my motivation. But to go back, it's everybody's different. So I don't view, somebody that takes the different path but gets there, more power to them. The thing that I love about it is that when it does come up in conversation, just like the fundraiser, it starts the conversation. And I'm very aware of not to be like, I feel like I'm better than you,
right? Because
I'm not drinking. I'm mindful to be like, I feel better for me because I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
There's kind of a common thread, and I know selfish can be viewed as a very negative thing, but it is a very selfish thing. It's like, hey, you do you. I want you to be safe, but this is why I don't drink. And the people that usually ask me about it, the first thing they say, and it's usually, especially if it's in a bar setting or a work setting and people have been drinking, I always love that drunk conversation where like, yeah, I've been thinking about not drinking either.
Yeah,
I'm like,
all right, January.
Well, keep on thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and I never thought I would be this person. I love being the DD now. I love it. I don't mind. I don't know if it's because I bartended for so long. As long as somebody doesn't get like belligerent, like that is, annoying, and it can still happen. But I don't mind being that babysitter or adult sitter and making sure, people that I love get home, even if they've had, 3 glasses of wine in 3 hours. It's to not worry about who's going to drive home.
Yeah.
I love that feeling. And plus I usually get to control the radios.
Well, yeah, right. Driver gets to choose. Well, my stepson, who's 6,
like, hey, we're going to be listening to Steely Dan for the next 30 minutes.
My stepson says, he says, Steven's the safety guy. He says he's also the funny guy, but he's a safety guy, which is sort of an interesting inroads to like building those relationships.
And this is another thing. This is not like to do a commercial, but these are my favorite things. Seltzer waters have become my addiction.
Yeah. So, shout out to Wegmans.
Yeah.
Sponsor me, Wegmans. You're welcome to.
There you go. But it's funny
coffee
because
and seltzer is like my main fuel source.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm waiting for like that research study to come out that like seltzer water like destroys the inner lining of your intestine.
Or all your teeth rots your teeth or something.
Yeah. But I
think
do
it's
love,
just water with bubbles, so we're safe.
Right. Yeah. I love the fact that because our older two, they would have been 5 and 4 when I quit drinking. And it wasn't like I came in one day, it was like, hey, kids, I'm not going to be drinking anymore. But they knew, Dad would have a beer after work. Dad would have a beer on the weekend. Dad would have beer when he was watching the game. And they got to a point where they were aware. They knew what beer was. And then, I quickly transitioned to a seltzer. And for the longest time, they just thought that was a beer. And then I remember a year or so afterward, they were like, Dad, what's that beer taste like? And I'm like, I don't drink beer. I haven't had beer in over a year. They started to realize, oh, that's not alcohol. It's not like they never witnessed me doing anything bad or that shocking moment of Dad falling down in the front yard or at a get together. And that's another thing you brought up, a family member. I never had that growing up. My dad went 20 years without drinking, and in that 20 year span, I was born and then out of the house. And never, at a family function on either side. I mean, my mom's side is she's from Germany, and so are her family members. And I remember beer being around, but there was never a party or a get together or an incident where someone got so hammered that they fell or they said something. So all of that, I think, impacts how we, react to it and why we quit and how we react after we quit. I remember when I first quit, I had told, certain people in my life that I was going to. And not to say this in a bad way, but my dad was like, we got to get rid of all the alcohol when Noah comes over. Right. I'm like, no, I want you to be the same. I'm in a journey internally here. There's not going to be oh, my dad's drinking a beer or there's a glass of wine over there and that's going to make me. But there are people
100%.
And it's just different. And
I have a family member who goes to 2 meetings a day.
Yep.
And respect for doing that work.
Yes, definitely. Not better or we're all headed in the right direction. We're just in different terrains. That's the way I look at it. And I'm not saying, I could turn around to 50 years old and something, snap in my brain where I'm like, oh my God, I miss having a drink. But that has not yet to happen or may never happen. I mean, I read a story and we were all talking about it last year because last New Year's Eve was my 10-year anniversary of not smoking cigarettes. And in this research study that my friend provided for me, they said it takes 10 years for that addiction to leave your body.
That's so crazy.
You can make it to 9 years, 11 months, and you could still be like, oh my God, I have. And that's the only thing I've ever quit in my life that I have come back to temptation wise, leaving a restaurant on a hot night after a big meal and I smell someone light up a cigarette. I could go back just like that. The night we moved our entire belongings from Ohio to New York, we stayed at my sister-in-law's house and she's outside, we're around a fire pit and she's smoking a cigarette. And I'm like, oh my God, I want one. She's like, just take one. And I said, if I smoke that cigarette, I will be buying a pack tomorrow morning. And I would have smoked that pack the entire way to Ithaca, New York.
Right. So. Know thyself. 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's really what we're talking about. It's
so
it doesn't
I can
matter
be around
how
alcohol. and be totally fine and actually feel more comfortable being around it, because I didn't want to be that person, especially like in my work setting or family setting, where, someone opened a beer and everyone like looked in my direction. Like, no,
Yeah.
fuck that. I'd peace out immediately.
Right. They're all putting them in paper bags so you won't see.
Yeah, but I can't be around people on a smoke break, because I would be right back in. Me and the owner of the store went down to Hudson Valley last Tuesday to pick up 40,000 records, and he asked if it was okay if he smoked. He was riding shotgun, and I just enjoyed being next to it. I mean, I felt like I was getting the little bit I needed, but it wasn't enough to get me to smoke a cigarette. So.
Yeah, my dad he quit and he would sit in smoking sections of the restaurant back when that was a thing, or on the plane. Remember, there's a smoking section on the plane.
We were just talking about.
They closed the curtain like that.
Yeah,
that
like
really like did something.
Thing.
Oh, no smoke.
Well, it's funny because I travel a lot for my other job, and people still make fun of me because I will forever wear a mask on a plane, even after the pandemic. I don't know why I wasn't doing it to begin with. I would fly, when I used to fly pre-pandemic, sans mask, I would always get some sort of congestion.
Yeah.
And then when you just think about what you're doing, because I'm still that person. I mean, I fly all over the place in the United States yearly. And I'm that person that's like, oh my God, we are in a tube flying right now. Like, I will never get over that fact. There's a comedy bit by a comedian that is like, we lose sight of what we're actually doing. Like, people get pissed when Wi-Fi doesn't work in a plane. Did you ever think you would be able to like get on the internet while you were flying?
And also be glad on the plane that's the thing going wrong.
Right.
Like, in the scheme of what can happen on the plane, Wi-Fi down is probably pretty good. Movie not playing, pretty good.
Right.
Wings falling off, bad.
Not good. Yeah.
Engines, bad.
But I just, if there's one thing, I learned quite a few during the pandemic, but like, I will always wear a mask on a plane. Like, if you actually sit back and think about how many people are breathing in there, what they're breathing, and doing more than just breathing, it's disgusting being in a flying petri dish. So.
I mean, I'd probably wear a hazmat suit if it weren't like awkward on the plane. Just like zip it up. Yeah. I'm good. Like, I'm good to go. Like, I don't fly that much anymore. Yeah. And I used to love it, but I don't really love it that much anymore. I like kind of being in control of the vehicle. And
I love it unless I'm flying into New Jersey or Philadelphia.
Well, in Ithaca, it was always trying to fly home from Philly was the problem.
Yeah.
Your stuff wouldn't make it, and nor would you.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, I rented a car in Philly once coming back from some work thing.
Yeah.
And like,
it's funny. Go ahead.
I called my boss. I was like, hotel or car rental? He's like, whatever you want to do. I said, I'm renting a car and driving home. I think my son was like 2 or something, and I just wanted to get home.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, I know. I told Jordan, every time I plan a trip for work, I'm like, remind me not to fly out of Ithaca, because in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, it's 7 minutes up the road. I can just park my car. And then literally, I don't even know if they have security there half the time. You're on the plane in like 7 minutes from the time you park. And then everything always goes to shit on the way home. Like, for some reason, wherever you're at, every flight back to Ithaca gets canceled or delayed. And so
my fiance was at a conference and was coming home trying to fly, and it was like I don't know, it was like bonkers delayed. It was they left it was supposed to leave at like 8:30, and they left it like 12:30 a.m. Yeah. It was like nuts. Yeah. And you just like want to, right? Yeah, you want to get home to your kids.
Yes, for sure. But even that has not made me want to drink in an airport. So, and that used to be one of my favorite places to drink at.
Probably meet a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of business, and that's another thing is there was that time, like I said, before I went back on my first work related trip, like, is this going to prohibit or hurt my work? Because that's the person that doesn't drink. But it's funny, like this last year on the trade show or convention circuit, is the first time I've seen, especially people like in my age range, not drinking at these things. And it's funny because you meet so many people, you know, in all these different markets, and you become friends on like Instagram and Facebook. And earlier this year, I had challenged myself to lose some weight because I'll turn 40 in this coming June. And it was just like a personal goal I wanted to do. And I did a post because I had lost, 20 pounds from my birthday to that current time. And I said that I made mention in the post that I hadn't drank for 4.5, 5 years. And within minutes, a guy that I had just met or re-met at a trade show in Atlanta or Orlando reached out to me, and he was like, man, I'm glad I'm not the only one that's not drinking at these things. And it just turned into a conversation. He told me why he quit drinking, and it was due, partially to becoming a father himself, going down a path that he just didn't like. And two different stories, two different time frames, two different areas of our country, but the end result. And that's the thing that I think all of us need to be proud of, is noticing an issue and not letting it consume you. And even though you can easily, we probably all have gone through this, even when you stop drinking, you think about that time 15 years ago, what you said at a party, or the time you shouldn't have drove home, or the times you shouldn't have drove home, and they can haunt you, but you're on the other side of it. The conversations are always the most important for me, making that impact, making that, positive impact, and be like, hey, it's doable. But yeah, there's this, I never thought I'd see it, even though it is very alcohol friendly and heavy. There's a whole other generation kind of coming out. And I think people going through the pandemic, there's a lot of drinking, statistics that said it went through the roof. But I think especially this past year, a lot of people are kind of just ringing it in. And I'm not one of those people that I don't think people should drink at all. But it's definitely America's drug. It's 100%. Promoted so heavily. It's just, a moneymaker, and it can do a lot of damage if it's not used appropriately. So
yeah, the anti-capitalist in me, comes through with big alcohol. And it's actually been an interesting thread out of a lot of these conversations, is about the economics of like alcohol and big alcohol, and like,
I don't know.
Wine o'clock for moms, and like, right, dads have a beer during the game. Like, it's really like pushed on people.
I remember downloading, I don't know if you were, I don't think it was around when you were still drinking, but there was I mentioned earlier that I loved trying new beers. I love, it's kind of like parallel with vinyl, especially if you do like a blind purchase, when you're like, oh my God, I wonder am I discovering something new? Am I going to discover something that I'm going to be enjoying and intaking for months and weeks to come? But there was a app called Untapped. And I remember me and my buddies downloaded it when it came out, and it was like, you got to track the beers that you tried. And it was like, it took on a whole different meaning. And I remember just buying beers and trying them just to do it, just to check it. And like, in all reality, I just could have lied, and been like, right. Oh yeah, I tried this beer at this thing. But it was like, it like even enhanced it even more, And from some of the people I've heard, I could go days without drinking. It wasn't, one of those things where I could, I had to have a drink every single day. But like I said, when I did drink, I made it count. I knew it was a problem when I'd start not telling the truth to my wife, who, we have a very transparent, we have not the most unique relationship, or most, type A relationship, but we're always transparent with each other. And I would say, oh, a meeting, was lasting longer than it was, so I could have one drink at a bar on the way back into town from my office, or be like, hey, I'm going to have one drink, and that one drink turned into 4. And, you'd come up with some sort of excuse. And then the other thing that I used to do that I knew, man, this is a fucking problem, is that I would get into the house coming home from work, and I would beeline it for the refrigerator, and I would open up a beer so she couldn't smell the beer that I had previously.
Right.
So those types of things, I'm just like, holy shit, like, this is not me. And that, that went on for way too long, and didn't catch on to it at first. But then like I said earlier, my wife's a very intuitive person. She caught on pretty quickly. And that's just, I mean, there's no other area of my life, even earlier in my life, because I'm famous for saying that me in my 30s wouldn't hang out with me in my 20s. But even stuff that I did later on, like that's just not my style, is to do something sneaky and very corny like that.
Yeah.
So, when you're doing those types of things and jeopardizing your safety aside, but jeopardizing your morality and the essence of who you are as a person for what, to grab another beer, it's when you look back on it, it's pretty pathetic.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an awesome place to stop. We've been chatting for a long time and super appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know when it goes live, and you will assuredly see me in the store.
Oh, perfect.
and not too long.
Remember that $25 gift certificate waiting for you down there. So
thanks for listening. For more information, for links to any music or books we talked about, or to buy some Sober Dad Crew merchandise, please visit soberdadcrew.com.